Good day, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to a very special episode of Real Tennis Podcast.
God, you did
It
very
is.
special.
It's our 112th episode, and it's a very.
I'm gonna come back for the 113. I don't like the 12 one.
I know.
You can come back for the 13 and the 14. We come back for the rest of it. And as you can tell, we have another male on the podcast today. But before we get to who our special guest is today, I'm going to introduce my co-hostesses with the mostesses. We have Andrine from Solely Tennis Travel. How are you?
I'm good. I'm up at 7 a.m. in the morning. This is good.
We're up at 11. We can't complain, okay? We all have to struggle. This is a struggle for everyone. Okay? And we have Janina from Orange, Ohio. How are you doing, Janina?
I'm good. I'm not struggling. I have been up since 7, but it's 11 here now, so I've had a pot of coffee and I'm good.
Well, I'm struggling. Okay, it's 11 for me, struggling. And there is me, Reels, and our special guest today, if you may not be able to tell, it's Sergiy Stakhovsky, the Ukrainian tennis player. And as we are being accused of being a Fed cast, I am just bringing back Sergiy because, he beat Federer at Wimbledon, and that to show you that we love everyone, whether you beat Federer or not. So how are you, Sergiy?
Thanks. Hi, guys. Well, that was so long ago that you actually don't remember it anymore. So it's okay.
Oh, no.
Oh, we remember. We remember. We never forget.
Yeah. Every media outlet makes me remember because every single time they put any stats about Roger's Grand Slam achievements, there's always this one,
Yeah, I mean, how fortunate has Roger been that he has not faced you last year or this year so far in the Grand Slams? So,
he's not losing, or him playing versus non-top 50 on the Grand Slams from 2003 lost once. Him not reaching quarterfinals since 2007 once not reaching stuff. I mean, I always did one, and they keep on reminding me that it actually happened. I'm like, guys, leave me out of it.
Cut the shit.
I just think, some of these Grand Slams, some of these other players need to put you in the draw next to Federer, and there might be a situation. Federer might not be getting number 21. Just saying.
Well, maybe Roger's paying them. Not
Oh, shit. Are you part of that crew?
On that note,
The favorable draws for Roger. Sergiy, just let us know.
so Sergiy, you just had a birthday. Happy birthday.
Well, it was like a month ago.
It was a month ago, but we haven't talked to you, so we're going to pretend like it was yesterday. What'd you do to celebrate?
Actually, I was in Australia. Wait, 6th of January. Actually, nothing. I kind of was in Australia in Playford, doing nothing. No, actually, I'm lying. I was in Melbourne by the time.
Yeah.
No,
Well, when it's an early year.
The Greek restaurant, the great Greek restaurant in Melbourne, and no, it was not much of a celebration. My family was back home, so I just had a dinner with friends, went back to sleep.
Did you drink? I know you don't drink, but did you have a celebratory glass of champagne?
Nothing like that, no.
Oh.
Somebody just said, just a number, 32, 31, 33.
Fair enough.
And how is the family? Your family's back home in Ukraine. I know you had a baby. She's now probably an adult by now. I have a girl. How are your babies?
Great, and they're in Budapest. Actually, they're not in Ukraine.
Okay.
We're currently living in Budapest, so it's been challenging. It was me traveling a lot lately, and they growing up, and they start to understand, and they start to not letting you go to the tournaments. They start to complain for you leaving. It's getting harder, I would say.
Oh.
Yeah. Well,
I can imagine it being so. I'm
I mean, that's the real deal. Not everyone has the capacity to take their family with them, huh?
But even though if you would have, it's just the jet lags, the life. I mean, what can you give them on the tournaments?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. When in real life, they go to kindergarten, they have different classes, English, aerobics. I don't know what else my wife is taking them on for.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, what can you give them on a tennis tournament? I mean, just apart from watching Papa and being with me, I will not be able to give them much of a knowledge. So I
That's
guess
true.
that's the better part.
It's an
But
interesting
they're excited when they see you when you come home, right?
That is true. Yeah, but unfortunately,
Okay.
every time I come, it's very short.
Once the excitement that you're coming home is still there, the minute they turn around and be like, oh,
So let's jump into the happenings of 2018.
Already.
Already, I know.
2 years, and everything you want to talk is 18. All right, let's do it.
So let's talk about Davis Cup a little bit. There were some changes this year. How do you feel about it? How do you feel about, 3 sets, a tiebreaker in the final set? Do you like it? Do you hate it?
Well, we've recently experienced in full capacities the I don't know how to even call the inventions by ITF, because I think they do everything what they can to do it wrong in every single way they can. Splitting up the world group, first group and the second group in a completely different criteria. We were in the first group. We played Sweden recently, as recently as yesterday actually, and we were playing Friday, Saturday. The second world group is playing Saturday, Sunday. The world group is playing around 3 days. Honestly, going down to 3 sets, I think is a good move. It's a good direction, but the way they put it is playing Friday, Saturday, and playing doubles before singles. I mean, yes, it might be great for big tennis nations like France, I don't know, Australia, Spain, Canada, where they have a lot of players. But on the other hand, these countries are playing world group. They don't play group 2. So
Yeah.
putting that load on the shoulders of a few players which play to push them to play doubles before singles, it's kind of tough. On the other hand, I have to admit that 3-set format is a great achievement, because for the fans, if we just consider yesterday, we played 2:30 doubles, 3 sets, and 30-minute break. Then I played hour and something in singles, and then the last match was about, I don't know, hour and a half. But already towards the end of the last match, people were start leaving, because I mean it just was too much of tennis for one day. And if you would say that it would be a 5-set of singles, it will be gone after one, I think. So in a direction for a spectator, I guess, yes, 3 sets is a great advantage. But in the concept of a whole strategy, what they're trying to do, I actually have no idea.
So you prefer it to be 3-day? You prefer the 3-day event?
No, I'm fine with 2 days. 2 days are great, but why you don't finish with doubles? Why you start with doubles? Why the break in between singles and doubles has to be maximum 30 minutes? It's like there's, even if we would play a doubles for 4 hours, the break would be 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's
there's a lot of limitation. There's a lot of things I don't understand. You have to start really late on Friday. We started at 5. We finished by 10.
yeah,
So, I mean,
and then you flip around. And if you're a small team, you're right. You're basically doubling up on the same day.
Well, it's more than doubling up. Imagine I would not be playing the first match on Friday, and I would start after Smirnov, let's say at 7, finishing at 9, and then starting at 1 again the next day with doubles and continuing with singles.
Yeah, that's a rough.
That's brutal.
Yeah, I mean, the best of 3 potentially means that you're getting off the court quicker, but we've seen best of 3 matches can go quite long. So there's no guarantee that it'll be shorter.
Or you can just watch Fabio Fognini play 12 hours in 3 days.
That's true. He really does show up for Davis Cup, so there's definitely a sense.
What's that?
Which because I think this is the outliers which have to be considered, because these matches are as good as it gets, and it just represents the best of the sport. And if there will be just a 3-setter, we're not sure there will be so much emotions and so much
drama.
I don't know how to say it even.
I was wondering about that, because don't you think in some ways that for someone like you who's been on the tour for a long time, right? I would think a best of 5 set would have been favorable to you, playing some of the players from Sweden, Well,
yes, of course it would be, because I would have more time to adjust, more time to find the right solution. But I mean, at the end of the day, we're in the entertainment business. And if we need to keep our fans in place, and for that we need to play shorter matches, then it is what we have to do. And
you know what?
Even
You
for
say,
players. Sorry, yeah, go on.
No. You say you're in an entertainment business. Some people will balk at that idea, but
Really?
you seem to sort of embrace it. Yeah. I think what that's been said quite a few times this past year. and even just recently. And I think there's been a little bit of pushback on like, oh my God, this idea that sports is just about entertainment. It can't just come down to that.
Well, no, of course, every sport is just trying to get as much financial as they can with all the sorts of innovations in entertainment. Yes, we are a traditional sport, a very privileged sport, they call it, although I don't know why. But at the end of the day, if people are not playing tennis, if people are not watching us play tennis, we're out of business. Which means we have to be not creative, but we have to be able to keep them engaged with this game of tennis. We have to be able to bring in young kids to play tennis. And this is the biggest problem we have right now. We're not able to bring young kids who would watch tennis and say, I want to be there, I want to play tennis.
Why do you think that is?
Honestly, 60% of it is financials.
Well, we wanted to talk to you about money.
Well, young kid growing up, and let's say if you put in a country, you had a 10-page newspaper, you have 6 pages on football. And every country is going to write that defender went, well, nobody knows him. Actually, recently was a defender who went for 65 million euros from one club to another.
Right.
65 million for a person who nobody knows. Okay, not nobody. I'm saying just in general, but, back in the day, let's say 60
right.
Ronaldo went somewhere for 65 million. Now, like, oh, that's insane. It's so much money for one guy. And now they're paying this money for people that majority of the population even doesn't know. So it is, for me, it's a matter of money, because when kids are reading, kids are growing up, they want to be successful in it and they want to be wealthy. And when they see football players, they see wealth. When they see American football players in States, baseball players, they see wealth. They see lifestyle. When they look at tennis, they see these few very, very super tennis players, and they say, well, it's kind of tough to be just these few. I mean, what about the rest? Where is the rest? Who is the rest? Why we don't know nothing about them? Well,
there was an article that came out recently that talked about what it takes to even break even in tennis and how you need to be in the top 100 to even potentially get there. And I wanted to ask you, it's public knowledge that over the course of your career, you've made just over $4 million. To someone who, sits outside of the sports arena, that sounds like a lot of money. But given how expensive it is for tennis just to play alone, is that a lot of money?
Well, it depends. Now, if I would have the same career, but starting as of now, I would, I think, earn triple of what I have officially on my account. And that would be something more significant than I have now. Everything is a matter of comparison. Yes, now tennis is doing much better. I would say significantly better than it did 8 years ago, 10 years ago. Significantly better. The money on the Grand Slams are significantly better. The tour is starting to pay players better. But still, if you put a cap where it should be, we're still very far off. Very far off. And yes, you're right. The expenses you cover, because, well, that's exactly when you compare with any other major sport, as of team sport, unfortunately, the club is taking care of everything.
Yeah.
Basically, what you get is your clean salary. You don't spend a penny. Whether in tennis, you pay for a coach, you pay for your travels, you pay for extra room when you travel with a coach, you pay for your flight tickets, for the meals, for per diems. Everything it comes out of your pocket. So unless you earn on it, so let's say my best year on the financial was around, I think 2014 or 15 when I was with Fabrice. And let's say I think I made around $680,000 that year. And that year solely, I made clean profit after taxes and all that, I would say 150,000, 180.
Wow.
God damn. Oh,
that's not a lot of money.
hey.
Well, let's say I had an expensive coach. But don't put it
No, but I mean that's a fair breakdown of everything in terms of the cost that goes into having a career on the tour.
On the other hand, if I would not have him, I would not even, I mean, it's all a matter of, judgment. If I would not have him, would I earn that money? Most likely not.
Well, it's a calculation.
Yeah. If you
Can I ask a question?
less, yeah, go on.
Oh, if you invest less, you're about to say you make less, right? Is that what you're about to say?
I would say so, yeah. But the problem is, if
If you don't have money, you can't invest.
you have to invest even when you don't earn, because you cannot just say day-to-day basis, like, oh, actually, I did not make money this week, and you fire your coach. So
Right, that is true.
payroll which you have to keep up, and whether you make money or not, you have to be able to pay.
Can I ask about, is there a way in which tennis is seen as an individual sport? And you mentioned one of the things, you're right, team sports, there is a lot of, much of the cost is covered by the teams. And the teams have like home operations, et cetera, like that, stadiums. So they're generating money and merchandise, et cetera. Merchandise is a big deal. But is there any way you think tennis as an individual sport can do a lot of cost sharing between players? For example, like a group of players decide, you know what, let's put money together and hire 2 coaches.
That's what players do. That's what a lot of players do in states, and I mean in different regions. When they cannot afford a coach, they just join in. They get 1 coach for 3 or 2 players. They get 1 physio, and they do sort of a team. But again, tennis, as you said, is individual sport, which means when you're going to play that guy, which you're practicing with, you sharing the coach, you're sharing the physio. I mean, who is that coach going to be coaching when you're going to be playing?
And also the scheduling. Also, scheduling is so different, right? Because it's like you could be going one person.
Yeah, you can get into one tournament, the other guy get into the second tournament. Who is going to coach travel with? I mean, it's all very, I understand because I'm a part of it now as well, but it is very challenging. And sometimes the coach you want, you cannot have because, when you're 3 and there's priorities set, you need a coach, but you just cannot have it because the other guy needs it too. So it's a very complicated agenda.
But you know what? One thing you said is that for you, if you were starting now, you would be fine making quite a bit of money. So the change is obviously that players are getting more money from the tours. But I think I saw a figure recently that said tennis players are only getting 7% of revenue generated from the tour.
By Grand Slam?
No,
by
Grand
Grand
Slams.
Yeah, Grand Slams. Yeah.
But that's the figure that the Grand Slams say. Yeah, 7 male and then 7 female, so it's 14 in total. That's their view.
Is that enough?
Well, it's wait. You say that's their view. Is that not your view as well?
No, that can't be.
Their view that they're paying 14. Their view is not that they're paying 7. Their view is they're paying 14. Well, the 14 is, well, if you look at any major sport, I guess you would say, well, it's not because every major sport is 50 or more.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I don't think their math is right.
But it doesn't matter that part of it though. But I mean, but you've made a really good point. For other sports, it's about 50%. So is that something that you all want to approach?
We want to have a fair share. I'm saying that 50% is more likely impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Being fair, I'm not going to be lying to anybody, even to myself. 50% in tennis in upcoming years is close to no chance, unless somehow tennis players will form a union, which is also questionable. But if put it back to the Grand Slams and put it there on the shoulders, as I seen tweeted back then when we're saying that the tournaments are generous and they're paying so much money to us. 2012 prize money of Australian Open, where when the players are starting to be a little bit disturbed by the balance of where the money were put into, our share of revenue was at 7.2% men, 7.2% women, which means we're about 14.4% out of all the prize money. So from 12 to last year, the prize money increased by 300%. So from 20 million went to, from 19 million went 250%, from there 55 million or something else. So we increased the purse double, 2.5 times. Our share of revenue went from 7.2 to 6.9.
So you went back.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But despite the fact so they're increasing the prize money, but they're also making more money
significantly more money.
More
And
money.
we're talking only about, we're not even touching US Open, where they are making far more money than Australian Open.
Yes, I can tell that being there. You can definitely tell that US Open is just making money hand over fist.
Yeah. So it is, I mean, it's the narrative where it is very hard for players not to be upset.
Yeah.
It is very hard for players to fight because, as you know, Roger, Rafa, Novak, they all have contracts which are connected to their image. And if they get slaughtered in the press for, being greedy, asking for more, the contracts most likely are not going to stay, or the image is going to be damaged.
But this
other entities, tennis entities, they are actually profiting from it because they know that they cannot afford to be vocal about it.
Yeah, that's very fair. I mean, I think one of the things I think is challenging because of what happened and how things sort of played out in Australia, and we'll talk a little bit about that, is the image of the player. In some ways, you need the top guys, right, to sort of participate in the negotiation, but then the perception becomes that they're selfish. So I think that in some ways it's almost like you've got to have a ground effort. Like it has to be from the player who is like the lower ranked player being able to articulate that, but then that person doesn't get any face time.
Exactly. Nobody's going to be listening to him, and he's not going to get as much attention as top players. So it's a great situation for the tournament, the Grand Slams, and for the tour. I'm not saying that the tour is doing great. I'm saying the tour is doing better in terms of percentage of revenue paying towards the players. But in any case, it's not doing great. And the Grand Slams are not even close. They're half behind, I would say. I think on tour we have average about 17 to 19%. Well, it also varies because of the categories, because of the Masters are doing more, 50s are paying significantly more their revenue than the Masters and 500. In balance, it's somewhere around 20 something percent, if I remember correctly the numbers.
So there's been all this talk of, possibly starting a union. Is that something that's realistic?
Well, I've been sitting on what council now 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
My term is going to end in Wimbledon, and I've been as involved as a player can be in a lot of things, and it's just sometimes we are kept in the dark, even by our own organization, just to make sure that things go as they plan them, not as we. So it is sad, and I think that's what sparked Novak for his speech, because there were a lot of issues ending last year which came to resolvement in a completely different matter that was presented to us. Unfortunately, I cannot go into details, but that I think sparked Novak, and he just had enough. Because
Can I ask
what happened? What can you share about what exactly happened? Because it was covered in the press in such a confusing way that by the end, I think spectators had no idea what happened. So what happened in terms of Novak?
No. What happened in Australia, I cannot say because I wasn't there. I left already because I lost early, so I was not even in a council meeting. And what happened, they had a player meeting. They asked the ATP staff to leave. And I think they have the right to do it as a players, because the player meeting are paid from the players' money, which are, well, ATP is a 50% player, 50% tournaments, which means we can have a conversation without the stuff of ATP. The circumstances why it happened, I would say it's more having a grudge from the 2017 ending. We had a lot of meetings, we had a lot of big plans, we had a lot of things we wanted to achieve by that time, and none of that worked out. None of that was what was promised was delivered. And we all got a little frustrated. And in real world, I would say union is the super solution. Unfortunately, with players from 50 different countries and tournaments all over 33 different countries, it is very, very, very hard to create anything much of a union. It's a matter of different laws in the different countries and different parallels. What I can say that in Australia, they had a union, they had a professor of law, Australian law, and there is a way in Australia to file an official government document to have a sort of, a better word with Tennis Australia in terms of negotiating the prize money.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's a fight whether you want to fight, you don't want to fight. Let's say you file that document, Tennis Australia starts to not sending you invitation letters. You're not going to be able to get a visa to come to Australia to actually. I mean, it's a whole complex. And for the past 6 years, I was
I'm sorry, Sergey, you can repeat that last bit. For the last 6 years, you were saying.
For the last 6 years, everyone who I met as a council member, I'm talking about the tournament representatives, the tournament owners, tournament directors, said, we're on the same boat. We successful, you successful. We fail, you fail. Why we have to constantly fight? And in the eyes, when we had meetings and dinners and all that stuff, they all say, yeah, we should be together. We should not fight against each other. But at the end of the day, they just play the same old strategy they always do. They just stall the time. They wait for the active players, which are in the council or which want some change, are going to quit, they're going to retire, and then there's going to come the young ones, and they have no clue what's waiting for them. They have no clue how the system works, and they just keep on rolling the same dice.
Would it be beneficial at all to join with the women to get something done, or does this need to stay separate from the WTA?
Well, join women to push ATP to pay higher prize money?
For tennis as a whole organization, to push.
Well, firstly, women have to be active. For the past years, women just been sitting out. I'm sorry, but they've been sitting out and just waiting for men to do the job, and they just ride the wave.
You know what? People have said that all the time. How could you characterize how they're inactive? How are they inactive? Because they have their own meetings, right?
I would say how they're inactive when they have their own meetings, and the year that the players, ATP players, are threatened to boycott or threatened to not play. I'm not going to use the word boycott because it's kind of dangerous. A Grand Slam because of the prize money issues.
Mm-hmm.
Very same year, the WTA with a former CEO, which is now gone, sitting there and saying that under no circumstances you support or help the ATP players or the ATP to achieve what they're trying to achieve with the Grand Slams. We don't need bad publicity. We will get anyways the same what they will get. That's a fact. That's coming from a WTA player, which I'm friends with, and that she shared with me after the meeting. So after that, it's very hard to rely on a WTA that they will be proactive.
Right. That makes sense.
So you think the WTA might not be willing to take the risk to stand with the ATP if it becomes really difficult in the negotiation?
That's one thing, and the other thing is it is superbly hard to put 100 players. I mean, I would say, okay, let's put 70% of on the same page to understand them the terms, to explain them whys and whens and what it's going to cost, and to get them aboard. Can you imagine doing this with women?
Why not? Oh my God.
Sergey.
It's possible, Sergey.
I just want to make something clear. I mean, you mentioned discussing with the Grand Slam tournament, but you and I spoke. You might not remember this, but I think you mentioned something that a lot of people don't remember, that the ATP Council doesn't get Players Council don't get an active member in the board meetings. You get a representative who you tell that information to, correct?
Yes.
So there is no actual players. The players don't get an actual seat at the table.
No, we had once. I think it was active. Was Ivan Ljubicic, I think back in actually 12, and then he resigned straight up because he was not able to fulfill his capacity along playing. I mean, honestly, doing council is almost impossible into full capacity while playing tennis. Not only that, that's significantly way above your head.
So in essence, you're getting someone who's taking your message, and you're not always entirely sure if your message is being articulated clearly.
No, we make sure, because that's the only power we have as a council, is to tell a clear message to our board representative, which are 3. And if they don't do it as we ask them, they always can be threatened with that they can be fired. And that's the only instrument we have on them. But the whole system of ATP is 3 votes from the player side representative, 3 votes from the tournament side, which on the tournament side board, there's only masters representatives sitting. And then there's a president. The majority of the issues which concern prize money, scheduling, categories of the tournaments, calendar, it requires a supermajority vote, which means 2 players' votes, 2 tournament votes. As you can imagine, you never, ever get a vote from a tournament regarding increase of prize money. For them, it's a business. The lower they pay us, the more they earn. So how, in God's name, are we gonna be asking them for more money if the system in which we are supposed to operate is not giving us the opportunity to defend ourselves?
Well, then it seems to me the construction of the system is set up for you all to, in some sense, always struggle and fail.
Pretty much. Well, not
be at their mercy, where they always have the upper hand.
They always have the upper hand because they're there for a longer period of time. Our careers are short. We can get injured. We can have a bad season. We can drop out. They're there. They're there for 20, 30 years. Same people. They know
the same person. They know so it's like a road. And so it always has to be active players, right? It always has to be active players on the union. It can't be in the council.
Yes, it has to be active players.
So that really is a challenge, because by the time you finish your stint, you've got
And then by the time now, let's say 6 years in, I understand perfectly how the system works. I understand what actually can be done, what cannot be done, how it can be done. But the problem is, I'll be gone soon, and the next guy's gonna come in. Again, it takes them another 6 years to understand, and then another 6 years for.
But can't you fix that by education? Can't you
in terms of who comes after you? But one thing, can we back up a little bit? You say you understand what can be done, what's possible. So tell us, what do you think is actually possible and viable? Yes, maybe a players' union is like the super compromise, but between that and what's viable, what do you think is really viable, so that we understand what you're playing with?
Well, to start with, the player union cannot be in an orbit of ATP, which means if the players will decide to make a union, the ATP is gone. Because the bylaws of ATP, it doesn't allow to players to have a union within the structure.
Oh wow!
So so basically, the ATP as an association would have to be disbanded in some ways.
Yes. Not in some ways, in a full capacity.
In full capacity.
So that's a risk. And what can be done? Little can be done to the tour. Little can be done to the levels of increases of the tour. There are some ways in which we can push the tournaments as of the Southlands to pay more prize money. Indirect ways, which involves, of course, the pushing of the Grand Slams, which involves, of course, but there's always this but. You will have to have a president on your side, but fully, not partially. You have to have fully president of ATP on your side to be able to push for it. The only thing as a tour we can do is usually tour is very happy to help players to fight Grand Slams. The only problem which we have now is we push it so hard that the tour is now scared, as of the Masters people sitting on the chair, because they are now looking pretty small by giving 1,000 points with paying almost 25% of prize money, 20% of prize money of Grand Slam. So it is, it gets there when they will stop helping us, and they basically stop stalling us, even against Grand Slams. So
you're able to push the Grand Slams a little bit. That's where you have a lot more wiggle room, right?
Well, because the Grand Slams are non-profit. all of them
Yeah.
but one, which means they run their budgets to the ground every year, and they have to publish their tax, which means we can see how
That's the
much
French.
roughly.
All of them.
Which one is
So,
not a nonprofit? Which one is not a nonprofit? I thought they all were.
Wimbledon. Wimbledon is a private entity.
Wimbledon private entity. Yeah. Okay.
For 4 times and the WTA 3 times, and still be very, very happy and not bankrupt. Let's put it that way. Because all the money they earn, they pretty much put it back into the facilities, or they just put it into the account sitting there for bedtime. So let's say if we don't come to Wimbledon don't give a damn about it. They say, okay, well, we just take another 100 players.
Oh, wow.
So
Well-
can I ask something? Can I ask you something? What part can the fans play? What can we do to help you?
Well,
Because it
again,
seems as
it's
if I don't
press.
think you can do this alone.
The only thing that the Grand Slams and the tournaments are scared about is bad publicity, because bad publicity is bad for business. Bad publicity make less people come to the tournament.
But you know what? But bad publicity is one thing. But I think in a strange way, you know, reporters are in some sense align with organizations and the slams, because just look at the way this negotiation was characterized in the press, though.
It was horrible. It was horrible. They absolutely slaughtered Novak for this. And this is exactly why I'm saying that it all comes hand in hand. If the reporter starts to report bad things on a tournament or on the Grand Slam will deny his credentials for next time.
Yeah.
So he cannot cut the tree on which he's sitting.
For sure. Never. Actually, that's always the challenge with tennis reporters overall.
So then, you know, reporters don't help, unfortunately, especially in the likes of Ben Rothberg.
Why? Why do you think Ben in particular doesn't help your cause?
When somebody of the reporters is putting a tweet saying that these are the tournaments which are combined, but they are unequal in their prize money, and you people should put pressure on them through Twitter and through media that this is ridiculous, it doesn't help, because some of those tournaments, the categories of the tournaments are, let's say we have a Masters and the women have a 250. How on that scale he wants to have an equal prize money? He never puts a tweet the other way around. When, let's say in Beijing we have a 500 and women have this super premier tie, when they earn more.
We don't understand that either. Trust me, we don't understand how their tournament ranking scale goes.
No, but that makes sense. I get it,
I get
because
what
I
you're
think
saying.
but there's a lack of clarity when you tweet out just like a you know, like a hit piece like that without really digging deep and clarifying that they're different levels.
Because I think it's very clear that the 250s can't pay more money no matter if they want to than the 500. The 500s can't pay more money than the Master Series, even if they want to, and the Master Series can't pay more money than the Grand Slams, even though like Miami and Indian Wells are same thing.
Yeah, well, they can. Well, the thing is, it's not that they cannot. There's no rule about the Masters going higher than Grand Slam, because it's not in orbit of ATP.
Yeah,
which means that there's no ties with how high the Masters prize money can go. The only ties within the system.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But show me a Masters, which is a pretty much not a non-profit organization which run by federation like Grand Slams, is a business model.
Mm-hmm.
Who will want to pay you, instead of 10 million prize money, 40 million prize money, and then instead of earning 60, earning 20. Not really sure about that.
Right.
In terms of that pie. So tell me though, but so what could reporters do better in terms of helping the narrative around prize money, and in terms of just helping players, highlight players' challenges better?
Just being fair, but again, journalism lately is not about journalism. It's about having a story.
Mm-hmm.
And fair is not a story. Something more crispy is a story, like putting a Novak Djokovic in flames for being greedy is a story.
Mm-hmm.
Novak Djokovic being greedy is a pretty rough statement, I would say, that he wants more, but actually the only thing he was doing, and he was paying for by himself for all the lawyers and all the knowledge that he gathered, he paid from his own money. and all he was trying to achieve and help other players, he paid, and it was expensive information together. It's a long-running project, and now he's greedy because he wants more. It doesn't really stick to me. But again, the press does whatever they want to do, and they deliver when they want to deliver.
Do you think the tennis? So, what do you think is a favorable, I don't know, outcome? What can you think can be done at this point?
We break at this point a very favorable outcome for the ATP and for the players and for the Grand Slam is to find a solution where the players are sharing the profits or revenues of the tournament. We don't have a set prize money. We just share profit. If we do good, we deliver good product, the tournament do good, we get good prize money. If we deliver a bad product, we suffer, we get less prize money. But we were willing to go this distance. We were willing to say, guys, if we have a bad season, if we have bad stars, if they all go injured, as happened last year, we're okay to suffer. But we are not okay when we deliver a full stands for the majority of the weeks, a super finals with super expensive tickets and getting paid 10 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, that sucks. And we saw that at the Australian Open.
But I mean, but the thing is, though, part of the journey of getting more revenue is that you have to be willing to risk not participating.
Yes, and again, how many players would want to risk that? You see, when you said, well, people after me, we have to prepare, we have to do, how many players wants to get involved? How many players will think twice before entering the council and saying, well, this is going to damage my career. I'm not going to be able to focus on tennis fully because of this. And
so can you tell us, have you actively went to people and say, we need to do this, and they just flat out say, no, I want no parts of that?
No. Nobody will say that. They will say yes, but they will want you to do it.
Okay.
Who bells the cat, right? It's that infamous story, right? Yeah, we have the cat, we have the mouse, we have the mice, the cat is coming, but we need to put a bell around the cat in order to find out when it's coming. But who is going to put the bell on the cat? And all the mice are like, oh, not me. But I'm trying to figure out like what the fans can do for you, because
the fans can demand stories, right? You could demand different versions of a different telling of the story. But I don't know if you know, tennis fandom is kind of divisive. So it's really difficult when you have the top guys, especially on your time, decide to make a play about something or say something, because there are people who are prepared to think of Novak Djokovic in one way, think of Roger Federer in another way, and that becomes part of the story. Do you know?
Yeah, everybody likes somebody more and somebody less. It's a normal world. They're fans of Novak, they're fans of Roger, they're fans of Nadal. There are all sorts of fans. And of course, when you'll be trying to say that this guy is doing this, they will attack him on other way. It always going to come to a different way. And they're engaging, but unfortunately, they're engaging in attacking more than defending.
So let's switch gears a little bit. There's been a little other controversy in the news recently with tennis on doping. Can you please explain to everyone exactly how it works when you have to declare your location for doping control?
Very simple. Thank God I don't have to do it for now because I'm out of top 100, but it's pretty much you have to declare 3 months ahead. You have to submit a everyday basis 1 hour. So every day is the next 3 months, you have to say where you're going to be. You can change that as close as 5 minutes before the time. But every day you have to log in 1 hour where exactly you're going to be, where the doping can come and test you.
And what is the process of doing that? Is it a phone call? Is it an email? Is it an app that you guys share?
We have an app, which is, before back in the day, it was no app. It was just the internet, which was horrible. We have an app, which helps a lot. But it's still, you have to declare, let's say I'm in Sofia now. So I would say my usual time was I would put 6 to 7 in the morning in hotel, in my room. So I'll put the name of the hotel, my phone number, and the address of the hotel. And
so it's an easy process.
And you are allowed to change it. So 5 minutes, if you know something's changed, you can change it 5 minutes before.
Don't forget. But there are things like when you fly from Australia, you fly for 24 hours. What do you put in air? Emirates flight.
I'll
I
be
in
the middle of the plane in the bathroom waiting for you.
I put an in-flight. I mean, I did. Well, there's all sorts of things, and they usually. I'll tell you a different way how the process works from the doping side, how they control it. So the doping officer gets a notification that the body, whether ITF, ATP, or WTA, want you to be tested, or the national federation. So they receive a notice. With that notice, they receive your 30-day agenda.
Mm-hmm.
They can plan within the 30 days, any day they can come, they want to come. So it's not like they receive a notice and in the next 4 days they have to test you. They pick their date when they want to come, when it suits them best, or when you're going to be the closest to them, or whatsoever. So
how does someone miss multiple tests? Like how viable is that a thing for you to take? Like if I'm a fan, how reasonable is that for someone to miss 3 tests?
Well, it's pretty much the same as how reasonable was Maria Sharapova not to check the doping list.
It's on you, right? It's on you to be responsible. That's what you're saying. You have to remember when you said you were going to be available, but it's all available on the app. You know when you said you're available.
Yeah, when I was doing it, I forget to change multiple times. I was lucky not to get caught based on the days, but let's put it that way. If in the times when I was doing it, they would come every single time when I forget to put it, I would be also banned. I would be gone.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe for her, it was just a coincidence of, things falling in. But on that time when she forgot, they came. And that happened a couple of times, and that's how it ended.
Do you think it's because it's like 30 days out? I mean, just think about anybody else's life. 30 days out feels like a long time for you to say when you're available or unavailable.
Well, yeah, but basically you just look at a calendar. You put any address, what you want. You can change it 5 minutes before. You can change a day before. It doesn't matter. I just always put a full length of staying at home 3 months ahead, and I was just changing it.
Yeah.
So I need to ask you a question, Sergiy.
You've only been asking questions.
I know, but this is my most favorite one.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Are you gonna have tortellini at Errani's house? Tortellini
at Sara Errani's house anytime soon. Are you and Sarah friends?
We're talking food now.
Yeah. Do you know Sara Errani?
I don't think he knows the context of it.
Are you friendly with Sara Errani? Let's start with the basic. Do you know Sara Errani? Do you know who she is?
Yes, I know. Yes, of course I know who she is.
Okay, are you friends with her? Can you see her and say hi and she says, "Hey, Sergiy, what's up?"
Of course.
Okay. Do you ever had a meal with Sara Errani?
Okay, you haven't done. Why?
Because go ahead.
The context is basically, some of the questions that have been given when people have doping violation. And she said, her mother made a batch of tortellini and doping drugs fell into it. And she ate that tortellini. I'm sorry?
I guess maybe I would not share a meal with
her. Try not to. I think that's what we want to let you know. Don't just have pasta with everybody.
Okay? Exactly. Be careful where you break bread.
Watch your pasta.
Watch your pasta. Exactly.
Watch your pasta.
We don't have to just stop on Errani. We had the same things on tour with
Gasquet.
Gasquet. Yeah, Gasquet was a funny case, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We had Cañas, for instance. We had Puerta. We had different guys. They took drugs from their wives by accident, a pill for pregnancy, or
I broke control. I remember that one.
As far as Ruzetsky, who said that meat in Argentina was clenbuterol in it.
Oh, God.
Yes.
Listen, a whole country's meat was messed up. So
it's always a.
So let me on a serious note, those type of what do you think about those type of should we take anti-doping? Because nearly everyone who has been allegedly caught with doping, they go to the court of sports of arbitration and it's been reduced.
Well,
can we take anti-doping efforts seriously?
Yes, we can, and we should.
So overall, you think it's working?
Well, it is working. It is working in terms of blood testing. It works in terms of finding something in your system. It works. The only problem when it doesn't work, as I agree, when players are taking it to the cask and then just slam the water. This doesn't work. Let's say Dan Evans, cocaine, 24 months ban, boom, reduced to 12. Maria Sharapova, banned for 2 years. Majority of the athletes which were caught on the same substance got significantly longer terms, reduced to 12 months. It's a spit in the face of water. Why should they try and catch somebody when, at the end of the day, nothing changes? They just sit out for some while and then get back on playing.
Yeah, or like allowing Russian athletes to, after punishing them, then going backwards. Do you know what I mean? So
it's very sad, because then the morality of the sport is just gone.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about allowing people to dope in a controlled environment? What if everyone was allowed to do it?
You want to have a sport of doctor versus doctor instead of player versus player? That's what it's going to be.
X-Men.
I mean, essentially, but see, that's what it comes down to, right? In some ways, that's what it would come down to. It would just it would come back down to money again, which is who's coming from a wealthier country, who's got like sort of like the
On top of that, how willing you going to be risking the life of a player in the future, because you don't know what this thing's going to do to him in 20 years' time.
Yep.
People don't seem to be. They rather weigh the option now and
then later.
Then later. I mean, we have seen what happened to the East German athletes. We've seen what happened to when doping was out of control in the 70s and 80s. But people just think, oh, we got smarter, better drugs. And the thing about doping is that all of these substances are not under strict scientific medical testing, right? It's just like, oh, I think it's gonna do this, so let's try it. So there is no long-term study. You can't do long-term study when it comes to doping, because of the effects that it would have on the body. I think it's deemed unethical in medical science.
That's why I take only multivitamins and just some stuff which I know. It's not even for the sport. It's just for yourself. I have 2 kids. I want to be able to see my grandchildren.
Right.
It's not going to be with all the body issues, not medical conditions. I mean, the back, the bones, the knees, the elbows. It's going to be hard anyway. But I don't need to add on top of that some liver problems, some lung problems, and all that stuff.
I'm having a third eye. And not in the mystical sense where you can see the future. Like literally, there's a third eye growing on your forehead like a cyclops.
So Sergey, you know what? One of the things you said, which I really appreciated, was like, you're willing to take your lumps. So you have a good ATP year, you're fine. You have a bad ATP year, we pay the price for it. So in terms of like, say like out of the Australian Open, how did you think the ATP fared there in terms of like the look of the sport and all the injured players, the final? Was that a good product? Was that a good product reveal for ATP?
You mean specifically what, the finals of the Australian Open, or the semifinals, or what exactly?
The question is, I think there's always this sense that it's always about, okay, how does the WTA compare to the ATP? Was it exciting? Was it an exciting tournament? All the conspiracies around the protection of Roger Federer, the roof, the heat, all of that. Did how did you find that storyline that was emerging from the Australian Open for the ATP side?
It is. You can be assured that it's not the same conditions that all players are competing in. Of course not. Mm-hmm. And it's not a secret when you're playing on Rod Laver. It was a closed roof, and some of the guys playing in 40 degrees on outside courts. The outcome of the match could be decided by the roof. Mm-hmm. The 2 players playing on 7, if the opening 40 degrees, if they'll be playing flavor, the winner might be different. But I'm sorry, it's always the fact for me is that he also started on those outside courts.
Right.
And he worked well. It's not like he was born Roger Federer and he started to play from qualifying on a Rod Laver Arena. He started somewhere and he achieved what he achieved. And yes, and that's why he's playing on a big arena. So for me, yes. Is it unfair? Yes. What would be fair? That they not playing matches in that heat? Most likely, yes. Will they be able to build 32 stadiums to play everybody in equal conditions? No. It's a sport where the best has the best coverage and the best conditions.
And that's what people are paying money to see.
Yes.
No, but I mean, that is a fair point. The idea that you can replicate the same condition for every player in like a 128 draw is really challenging. Yeah, no, but I mean, that's...
On the other hand, you have players which will say, no, I want to play in the 40 degrees. Why they put the roof? It's not fair for me because I'm physically better than the other guy and he beat me just because there was a roof. So you will always have this,
But what about the fans who paid money to watch this match? Should they have to subject themselves to 40-degree weather when they're not playing?
But that's why you're going to an outdoor tournament, I guess. But yeah,
when that stops coverage, right? Nobody can play when Semitic is in there dealing with 15 people.
When there's 45 degrees outside, there's almost nobody on outside court. It is very hard to sit in that weather outside. So all the people are in Margaret Court, Hisense, or Rod Laver.
So let's talk about something a little bit fun before we let you go. Tell me, from the perspective of an athlete, do you prefer the tennis atmosphere of Davis Cup when the fans are so engaged and rowdy and excited, or do you like the quiet, polite tennis crowd that, doesn't speak?
Wimbledon.
No, Wimbledon is not nice and not quiet. Honestly, playing Davis Cup is a significantly different feeling, completely different feeling. When you're playing for a nation and you have your countrymen supporting you, it's very different. Of course, I don't know, maybe some players like to play in the quiet conditions. I love to play in big stadiums with a lot of people, even when they're not cheering for you, just the atmosphere and the whole excitement of the process.
Do you think tennis can do?
Yes.
Do you think tennis can work with like a basketball type atmosphere? Like, when tennis is being played, the umpire is like no movement behind the server or behind the returner. But in basketball, when they turn free throws, there are the fans waving shit around, acting all crazy,
trying to
distract the player.
Have you seen the size of the basketball?
But that's true. You're right. You're absolutely right. I haven't thought of that. You're right. You can't miss that. You're right. So you prefer it. So between the points, there should be less activities going on.
No, it's just basketball. Throwing the free throw is a static thing. You have the ball, you're in the position, you know the distance, you train it 100 times. In tennis, you're in motion. Ball comes at different speed at you from another player.
True.
You don't control the situation. The situation controls you. Well, unless you're Roger Federer.
That's why he's okay. And guess what?
No, man, but the fans want to participate in the outcome. So that's what they want in a tennis match. They want to make sure you mess with, you get that ball.
Yeah. It only depends on the zones, where I think the lower zones around the tennis court should not be moving while playing. The upper, I think there's no problem with them moving and screaming and shouting. It's just the point of that when inside of
So the rich people need to shut up and not say anything, but the poor people in the stands, they can act wild. Right?
Pretty much.
I agree. In the US Open,
So, Sergey,
people are constantly talking.
What's coming up next for you?
Sofia. That's where I am. And yes, and then I'm going to go to Rotterdam, Marseille, and then travel to States for Indian Wells, this new challenger, and then the quality of Indian Wells in Miami.
Ooh.
And is there there's usually players meeting in Indian Wells, right? So you guys are going to revisit these things in Indian Wells?
Yeah. Looking forward to that one.
That'll be fun. Honestly, though, I have to say, you guys have to find another person to be your voice, public voice. Introduce us to somebody new. It can't be the top guys. That's part of the challenge. We're just gonna have to say it. People, I mean, you know what it is? People cannot, they can't separate the fact that maybe Novak or Federer or Rafa is actually talking about a lower ranked player, or the challenges for the sort of poorer player on tour. It's just visually, it's so difficult for people to make that shift in their brain, you know?
You're saying we should hire a spokesperson for the council?
I think so. I think, there's something to be said for that. There's something to be said for somebody who can actually articulate the player's position more clearly. Yeah. Because first of all, let's just understand it. The tour is really divisive in terms of fans. It just is. And it's also divisive in the way that people perceive players in terms of reporters and how they talk to the player. Yeah, how someone covers Murray versus, or you know what, Murray do a lot of the talking. He's probably your most positive player right now in terms of how people perceive him. They perceive him as okay with equal prize money. They perceive him as a feminist. They perceive him in he's not divisive.
He's not going to come across like a Roger Federer camp or like a Nadal camp or a Djokovic camp, because Murray just seems.
Or what if you, instead of finding an outside person to speak for you, you put a lower ranked player next to that top player, and that top ranked player says, listen, this is who you need to hear from. This is who you need to be listening to. Because when Roger Federer speaks, let's be real, people listen. So if Federer says, I want you to listen to this person, and they are ranked 250 in the world, and these are their struggles, people might listen.
Yeah, you've just got to change the table around a little bit, or if you can't do that, I swear Andy Murray is a really good voice for that.
Mm-hmm. And he isn't doing anything right now. He isn't doing anything right now.
No, I mean, it's sad. It's sad, but it's true. People are not mindful about the dynamics between players and their fans, and also players and the reporters. It really, so people can't even hear your message.
We'll try to, I mean, that's something to discuss, honestly. We never looked.
And I think you need to probably
your stars are not always going to be your best
because everyone is thinking about, they're not thinking about the actual money that they collect on the tour, like prize money. They're thinking about all of the endorsement money that they make, and they're looking at that as being the greed factor. Like, how can they possibly get more or want more? But when you quote these figures of 7% about the total amount of money, and I go to the US Open, and it's a lot of money they're making. And to imagine being out in that hot, sticky, humid weather, and you're only getting 7%, and you can't even break even. That is unfair. And maybe you need to get fans to be more involved.
What did you say about the US Open? What did you say about the US Open, Stakhovsky?
It's less than 6.
Less than 6, even less than 6. Oh, so I just, that, from a fan perspective and for somebody who's sympathetic to the issue, that is one thing that we can definitely admit, is that you've got to put a different face on the issue. It really is important.
Oh, and the other thing you can possibly do is, instead of taking your story to the usual tennis media circus, you take that story outside, like how BuzzFeed dealt with the
doping
betting situation, the betting and doping situation. It caused a big stir. I mean, and as you noticed with the Maria Sharapova story, it wasn't tennis journalists who was giving critical information. It was the journalists who were outside of tennis.
Because honestly, because other sports cover union issues, because those sports have unions, so they understand it differently. And so when you communicate tennis's issue to someone who's like in basketball, they'd probably like, what the hell are you guys doing? So it's just like you have a different sympathetic audience. And also you're acknowledging that sports people that cover tennis have challenges, is that they can't get themselves in trouble. But an external person to the sport would love it. They want to hear about this. It's just something to consider.
And maybe also get, in terms of education, what you can do, instead of having the same set of ATP players talking to other players, maybe you get some of the former basketball stars who they like. Because if Charles Barkley is talking to some of these people, or not Michael Jordan, because he's not a player union type of person, but Kobe Bryant, or I don't know, anyone else in football and whatever, they might listen. Because, if you bring outside influence and be like, guys, y'all are not getting more of the players, more of the pie to get.
Yeah.
This is another topic for another.
Yeah.
So now that we've told you how to run the ATP,
bring some Indian Wells and tell them that you need to bring Reel's Tennis Fan podcast into the room.
No.
All three of us are available
Sergey.
for free once expensive are covered.
Get it for Janina. What were you saying, Janina? Yeah, so
I was just going to say thank you so much. You've been very generous with your time. We love having you on.
Yes,
Best of luck in 2018.
Anytime you want to come on here, Sergey, to discuss any issues, you can come
and
to our podcast.
Stay away from Federer in the draw, please.
Yes, especially. Yes. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. What did you learn? Because I just learned a lot.
Okay, yeah. Tell us what you learned. This is great.
I did not know that there wasn't a cap on what masters could pay their players. That this was purely a judgment call on whoever's running the tournament. Yeah. So, if they wanted to pay them more, they could.
Well, I think this has been the challenge with Indian Wells, right? Because Indian Wells, in some sense, is sort of a cash cow tournament, and they were prepared to play more. But I think the issue around cap is a sort of mutual issue for the other masters, which is, I think, one of the reasons why they were thinking of creating super masters.
Yeah, because ATP Indian Wells in Miami can be a week and a half, 2 weeks event. And
no. I'm talking about beyond that. It's about the prize money as well.
Prize money.
Money. Do you know what I mean? Because then it's like you're creating dissension amongst your own ranks. If you're able to pay somebody twice as much, like if you're able to pay twice as much as Rome, for example, then that creates, that would not necessarily create problems for Rome. But you've got a millionaire running Indian Wells, and he can do whatever the heck he wants with his money. Rome doesn't have the same issue.
But aren't those tournaments being run by Tyriak?
But I mean, but it's a different bottle, right? It's a different animal in terms of having somebody who thinks of this as like, I mean, in some ways, it's sport for the guy who runs Indian Wells. He could do whatever he can make it.
Right, I get what you're saying. Yeah. This is just a sort of a distraction, like a little pet project.
Kind of on some level, right? And so he could make improvements, and he's not worrying about sunk costs.
For me,
so it'll be it. Oh, go ahead.
I mean, the thing I found interesting, and I mean, it's just like every time I think I'm gonna come to tennis and approach, like, tennis is my distraction from this fucking crazy world, I realize tennis is a microcosm of this fucking crazy world,
tennis
right?
Is a hot mess.
Can these people going through the same struggle that ordinary people face in a somewhat way, right? They're all struggling, they're fighting the capitalists, people are like placating them, be like, yeah, we're gonna help you, yeah, and then turn around and screw them in the ass. And
except tennis players are capitalists. That's the thing about them. They haven't, because even
we all are trying to make money too, right? In this world.
Yeah, but even the money even the way that Sergey was able to talk about, I thought it was interesting that he was willing to go with the way of the market. Like if it was a bad market for ATP one season, they should pay the price for it. That's a different kind of thing to say.
Yeah, we don't hear that anywhere from any other player.
Understandably, because remember that the ATP is set up in a way 50% players, 50% tournament. So it is his point of view isn't that crazy when there is a joint partnership, right? That we all should experience.
But he's talking about it even beyond that. He's talking about moving the revenue model such that it isn't lockstep like that. That it's like if you
it could fluctuate.
It could really fluctuate. That's what I'm saying. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
and that's just business.
Well, actually, I don't know if you know this. Well, it makes sense in the way because they already have a similar type of thing on the ATP in terms of like, in order to get a pension, you have to be motivated enough to make X amount of main draws over the course of several years. Mm-hmm. In order to be into so it isn't just like, oh, I'm part of the ATP, I'm playing challenges all year long, right? There is an incentive in order to make out on the back end of it for you to move up the rankings, for you to be in part of like the main draws of big tournaments. So you can't just be a scrub all your days of your life and expect to reap the same benefit of people who've worked hard and has maintained being in the top 50 for like 6 years, 8 years in a row. So there is that sort of a thing already a part of the ATP. So I think that's how he sort of see that, like you have to work hard in order for it to get, in order to reap the rewards of the sport, you have to work hard. We can't have any slouches on our watch kind of thing. And that seemed to be,
I
it's
hate that model though.
But I hear you. But when you think about like work, as opposed to if you think, like we're all joining, we can all be part of it if we make money.
No,
it changes your output at work.
I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that because I think some people are constrained by what they can give. I mean, that's you know what I mean? It's like some countries are not able to do that. You're coming from a country that has these constraints and resources, and so
that sort of implies that everything has to be equal, right? And everything isn't equal.
Everything isn't equal. Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's like the whole equity, equality thing. When you see people looking and they're like, well, if you're starting at 0 and I'm starting at 20, I need to figure out how to get you to 0. Get you to 20. And so that to me feels like the constraints of the ATP model right now.
They don't have a base value. They don't have a base where these are the things that once you get on.
Well, I think the biggest thing that we just heard, and it'll be interesting to hear, what people who listen back to this heard. The biggest challenge is that the entire system seems to be set up that the players cannot make a big move. They can't. If you have 7 people making a decision for an entire body of sport and only 3 of them are players, they can't win.
I mean, I think you can. I think what it sounds to me like is they need to figure out how to get one of the 3 on their side. It's like the Supreme Court.
Right.
Sure.
You got to figure out.
But that's a very small number to represent such a large group of people. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, but think about it. The Supreme Court represents millions of United States people. Do you know what I mean?
But it takes a long time to get to the Supreme Court. This is really their first step and only option. There's not
this Trump administration. No,
but for them, this player council and the way it's set up when they want to make moves, this is their spot. They don't have a system to move through. If they vote for something and it gets shot down, there is no, Supreme Court to take it to the next level. It just is. That's what I'm saying.
They're suffering more from a sort of an education and information problem.
Yeah,
the information, proper information
right now.
Educated exactly because he's saying
they're gonna be.
He's been there for 6 years. He has this information, but the board can wait them out. The board has dinosaurs on it, elephants rather, because they never forget. They remember, and they can wait out people like Sergey. But that information, the young players just roll up, and there is no. That's what. And again, it's just like life, right?
ATP University needs to be there.
Yeah, you're talking about complex issues like healthcare and like tax, etc. And people vocal in this information, just like idiot. You don't have the information. You are completely confused, or just willfully ignorant on the issues, and you need to be educated. You need more information in order to be part of this discussion. And I think the ATP players have to do a better job at that.
You know what though? For me, the most compelling part of what he said is really the characterization of the play of all the players in it. Is the recognition that the slams or the tournaments have their own position, and that you have the players, and then the reality of where the media falls. Yeah. Because let's think about the fallout from 2018 Australian Open. The way that whole storyline was characterized was so flawed. Because I didn't read any report that started off by explaining the landscape that the players were challenged by. Nobody started that way. And what it was, it became a referendum on how you felt about Novak Djokovic, became a referendum on wealthy players wanting more. I mean, that was really the narrative that reporters
And here's the thing: no one asked the players, right? No one asked the players. Because
they did ask the players, but the players actually, in some sense, became more reticent because they understood that the reporters, in some sense, were
going to help them. But he made a very good point, and this is something he had mentioned before when Roger Federer and Novak. When you have these big players in the room discussing their issues, things get done. Something happens because
I don't think he said that.
I'm not saying that. I'm not. No. I mean, in terms of like, no, because Novak was able to. He mentioned the fact that Novak was able to bring his own money, get attorneys, get the information, and pass that information on to them. And that is information that they would not have ordinarily been able to get.
Sure, but ultimately, what did that get them?
But it didn't move the needle. It didn't move the needle.
Exactly.
And
that's
because at the end of the day, you need the public's perception and participation in fighting for the people who care about the sport. And so, to my mind, I mean, think about how Novak was characterized in this.
The way it was reported as Novak asked, basically, clear the room, let's have a coup, and he's the devil, which, you know, I mean, whatever, I'm not going to say it, but I mean, that's how it was reported. That's how it was reported. He's this bad guy trying to, you know, like, I don't know.
Undo. But this is what I mean in terms of tennis narratives and the way that reporters mess it up for you. Mess it up. I mean, how is it that you're a legitimate reporter and that's how you're characterizing, in some sense, a kind of labor issue? How do you characterize a complex labor issue as a personality snafu? Which is similar to what they did with the Australian Open in terms of heat. They characterize it as a Federer favoritism issue. You know what I mean? It's like they take serious issues and boil it down into like a soap opera.
Because they're dealing. But what is happening here is, but as we know, and we have read this, what we're dealing with a lot of I'm gonna put people who write about tennis. On Follow the Tone write about tennis. I refuse to call these people journalists per se, is that they're dealing with their own petty jealousies and petty grievances and petty issues and their own favoritism, and they're not calling attention to that. So they're gonna write a hit piece and try to pretend that they are like this impartial point of view because they get followers.
I never buy
into that. But you know,
it's best to have a preference and state it out loud so that everybody knows where you stand. And because otherwise, we all know who gets favorable covered by journalists. That's the sad thing. We know if you want a favorable cover for Novak, there's one journalist you go to. We know if you want favorable cover for Federer, there's another. If you want favorable cover for Murray, there's another. If you want favorable cover for Serena, I don't think there's anyone. I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, you all
there is a army. You got an army, and she got Claudia Rankin.
Yeah, but you got it external. But I mean, I think you guys made a really fair point about the dynamics that plays out, and I really do think that they should go to other reporters to cover this.
Yeah,
those are the people who have actually brought the changes in tennis.
They need a PR person, and I think what they do, and I mean, like, honestly, I mean, like, you know, I'm not always a fan of Murray feminism and his, you know, I can't stand that idea.
He's good.
He's the person you might need.
But I think he's the least divisive voice, and I think people are willing to listen to. Yeah, and so, and actually, I really do think they need to bring players up because I think he's seen as being the one. We need a public issue. We need to have public faces for this issue. It can't be the star faces. I honestly do think that. I don't need to see Novak talk about these issues. I mean, as much as he knows it, or even Federer, as much as they might know it, nobody's going to be as passionate about it as the person. Yeah,
no one's going to be sympathetic for a rich man.
Yeah, it's just impossible to do it. I mean, I know people got confused that Trump was a rich person. So maybe you just need somebody who's able to articulate it like that.
Yeah. You know who I thought of? But you can't trust him around money. I thought when you said that ex-player, just like Boris Becker might be an excellent person. But no, Boris has too many outside issues and you're going to have too much problems.
I would never be able to trust that.
No, because the reason why I said Boris is that you need someone who's going to come across as an asshole, who will be an effective communicator, who can take the hits and keep on going.
No. But this is too favorable. It's too divisive an issue to put somebody like a Boris. You need somebody with solid background. I think even like a Lendl, like somebody who's just not tainted by any of the things that's happening. I mean, Boris has his own financial issues. The moment you look at him, you're thinking about his financial issues. I mean, maybe he's
a poster boy, like, why we need help. Okay, this is why we need help. He needs to be part of the advertising program. He can't be the spokesperson, but like, there you can be like a Boris post-career, but he mentioned something that I thought he didn't really mention it, but he hinted at something that we always talk about, is how ingrained tennis is, that you have the same set of people constantly at these places. So they're in lockstep. They are in formation. and they know that the players, the outside entities, the players are gonna constantly change. They lock in.
That's a really fair point.
Whereas and players who are part of the organization, they are not going to cut down the tree that they're benefiting from.
Yeah.
So they are all in part of this thing. I mean, like all of these academies and whatever the case may be.
It was very useful.
He mentioned something very interesting too. Young players, tennis is not attracting young people.
Yeah.
They're not. And that sucks.
So,
That really sucks.
It'll be interesting to see what everybody else heard.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really curious.
I'm sorry, people, that for just put it out there. If the sound quality from Sergey didn't come through properly, that might be because Sergey was on his phone without his headphone, and he was at a stadium. So we tried our best.
Try to tune it up. Try to turn it up, the volume up in moments. Hopefully, you're able to hear as much of it as you possibly can.
And if you have any questions for him, you can pass it on to us and we can give it to you. If he hasn't blocked you on Twitter, because some of y'all are very nasty and y'all deserve to be blocked. But if you're not blocked by him, you can definitely tweet him about it, because he's very willing to answer a question. And I thought he came across very clear. He was articulate. He knew what he was talking about. And that's what I always enjoy about guests, that they come and they're very knowledgeable. So I'm excited I'm happy we had another episode of more ATP Tea with Sergiy Stakhovsky.
Good deal.
Exciting episode, Lee.
Cheers, y'all.
Again, we had the Roger Federer podcast.
Have a great Super Bowl Sunday.
Girl, I ain't got time for that mess. Is Colin Kaepernick playing for the NFL? No, he's not. So guess who's not watching NFL?
You wouldn't be watching anyways. I don't even know who the hell you're trying to
Girl, there are men running around in tights. There are men running around in tights.
Yeah, we only
Why won't I be watching that? Men running around in tights.
I mean, ironically, we're talking about labor issues, and then we're going to go watch the Super Bowl. That is basically blackballed an athlete. So there we go.
Exactly.
Have a great day, y'all.
Colin ain't playing. I ain't watching.
All right.
Thank you, ladies. Not even for the commercial. Have a good day, ladies.
Ciao.
Bye.